On the night of October 1st, 1960, a 14-year-old boy named Raymond Eugene Brown quietly slipped through the back door of his family's house in Ashland, Alabama. The door was unlocked, and Raymond wasn't there for a family visit, he was there to steal. But this wasn't a stranger's home. Inside were his own relatives, his aunt, his grandmother, and his great-grandmother. These were women who had cared for him, trusted him, and welcomed him into their lives. That night, when his Aunt Berta May caught him in the act of stealing, she became his first victim. Raymond's attack was brutal and relentless. He stabbed his aunt 123 times, ending her life in a frenzy of violence. But he didn't stop there. Driven by a cold logic to eliminate any witnesses, Raymond moved through the house, targeting the other two women. He methodically killed both his grandmother and his great-grandmother, ensuring there would be no one left to tell what had happened. Before I go deeper into this harrowing story, I want to remind you to like this video if you find it informative, and subscribe for more true crime stories. Your support helps us keep sharing these important cases that deserve to be heard. Let's go back to the beginning. Raymond Eugene Brown was born on January 11, 1946, in Ashland, Alabama. He was one of 4 sons born to Marvin and Emma Lou Brown. By all accounts, Raymond's early years were unremarkable. Family and friends would later struggle to understand how he could have changed so drastically. They remembered him as a cheerful child with a typical upbringing. No one saw any warning signs of the darkness that would later emerge. At Clay County High School, Raymond seemed like any other promising small-town kid. He played on the junior varsity football team, did well in sports, and was popular among his peers. His teammates liked him, and most people described him as friendly and easy to get along with. There were no red flags, no troubling behavior, nothing to suggest that anything was wrong. Even years later, those who knew him tried to look back and find clues they might have missed. But the truth was, there were none. Raymond never gave any hint of what he would one day do. On that fateful night in October 1960, Raymond made a choice that would change his life forever and shatter the family that loved him. His motive was shockingly ordinary. He wanted money to buy football cleats. The house he targeted was not just any house. It was the home of his relatives, his 31-year-old Aunt Berta May Martin, his 63-year-old grandmother Ethel Ogle, and his 82-year-old great-grandmother Ivana Ogle, who was disabled. These women had welcomed Raymond into their home countless times. Raymond entered through the unlocked back door, moving quietly through the familiar rooms as the women slept. When his Aunt Berta May woke up and found him stealing from the kitchen, Raymond's reaction was beyond comprehension. Instead of fleeing, he attacked her with a kitchen knife. What followed wasn't a moment of panic, but a sustained, calculated assault. He stabbed Berta May 123 times, a number that speaks to uncontrollable rage. But the pattern of wounds suggested something even more chilling, a deliberate, systematic violence. After crossing that line, Raymond saw the other two women as witnesses who needed to be silenced. He went to the rooms where his grandmother Ethel and great-grandmother Ivana were sleeping and stabbed them both repeatedly, making sure they were dead. Then, in a final act of brutality, he slashed the throats of all 3 women from ear to ear. 3 generations of women who had loved and trusted him were now dead by his hand. The next morning, Raymond's mother, Emma Lou Brown, discovered the horrific scene. When police arrived, they found bloody heel prints throughout the house and evidence of violence, so extreme that even seasoned officers struggled to process what they were seeing. The investigation quickly focused on Raymond after police spoke with his classmates, some of whom said he had mentioned visiting his aunt after soccer practice. 5 days after the murders, officers found Raymond in the school gym and brought him in for questioning. Raymond didn't try to deny what he had done or claim so. He confessed to the murders with a matter-of-fact attitude that unsettled everyone in the room. He described the events and details as if he were recounting a normal day, showing no emotion, no tears, and no sign that he understood the gravity of his actions. His fingerprints matched those found at the crime scene, and his confession sent shockwaves through Ashland and beyond. The entire community was forced to face the terrifying reality that evil could exist without any obvious warning signs. The case quickly became a sensation, drawing attention from all over Alabama. In the days after the murders, souvenir hunters tried to break into the house, and authorities reported that more than 600 cars from 18 counties and 9 other states converged on the small town. On October 10th, the Clay County Prosecutor's Office faced a critical decision that would set a precedent for how violent juvenile offenders were treated. Raymond's lawyer requested that he be tried in juvenile court, but prosecutors pushed for him to be tried as an adult, which would make him eligible for the death penalty. They ultimately decided to try Raymond as an adult and ordered a psychiatric evaluation at Bryce Hospital in Tuscaloosa. Months later, Raymond was found sane and fit to stand trial. When the trial began, the courthouse was packed with curious onlookers. Throughout the proceedings, Raymond showed a disturbing lack of emotion, often sitting motionless or covering his face with his hands. The evidence against him was overwhelming: witness testimony, material evidence, fingerprints, and his own confession. He was quickly convicted, but the jury recommended mercy, sparing him from the electric chair. Instead, he received 3 life sentences. Even during sentencing, Raymond remained emotionless. There were no tears, no pleas for forgiveness, and no sign that he felt any remorse for the 3 lives he had taken. At just 14 years old, Raymond entered the Alabama prison system, becoming one of the youngest inmates ever convicted of multiple murders. While incarcerated, Raymond seemed to adapt to prison life. He studied to become an auto mechanic and took part in rehabilitation programs, earning a reputation as a model prisoner. Psychologists who worked with him noted his intelligence and his ability to talk about his crimes with what appeared to be growing insight. He spoke about rehabilitation, expressed what seemed like genuine regret, and showed behavioral changes that the system was designed to encourage. After serving 13 years, in 1973, Raymond was granted parole. He was 27 years old and, on the surface, appeared to have changed. The decision to release him was not made lightly. Officials had watched his behavior for over a decade, noting his participation in programs, his acquisition of job skills, and what seemed to be the development of empathy. Upon his release, Raymond returned to Ashland, living with his mother for a while before moving to Montgomery, where he found work at an auto shop and eventually rented his own apartment. For several years it looked like his reintegration into society was a success, but in the late 1970s, things began to unravel. Raymond developed a serious alcohol addiction that started to affect his behavior in troubling ways. While drunk, he began sexually harassing women and girls in the Montgomery area, displaying predatory behavior that grew worse over time. In 1980, his actions escalated to a horrifying level when he raped his apartment manager while intoxicated. During the attack, he tried to strangle her until she lost consciousness. Believing he had killed her, Raymond fled the scene. When the woman regained consciousness and called the police, Raymond was quickly arrested. Because he had committed a violent felony while on parole, he was sent back to prison. The man who had convinced experts of his rehabilitation had shown that appearances could be dangerously misleading. Raymond remained in prison from 1980 to 1986. During this second stint, he once again participated in programs and maintained exemplary behavior, showing the same intelligence and apparent insight that had marked his first time behind bars. However, the 1980 assault changed how officials viewed his case. The sexual assault revealed a clear pattern of violence against women, suggesting that his capacity for harm had never truly gone away. Despite these concerns, Raymond's behavior in prison was exemplary. In June 1986, he was granted parole for a second time. This decision was even more controversial than the first. Given his proven ability to commit further violence after his release, Raymond returned to Montgomery and found work at another auto shop. For the first few months, he seemed to be doing well, holding down a steady job and avoiding the alcohol abuse that had led to his previous crime. In late 1986, Raymond met 31-year-old Linda Lamar, a single mother with a 10-year-old daughter named Sheila Smoke and a 6-year-old son named Aaron. Linda had no way of knowing about Raymond's violent past. Parole records were not public information. The relationship developed quickly. Raymond presented himself as someone who had overcome adversity and was committed to building a stable life. His charm and apparent devotion to Linda and her children convinced her that she had found someone who could complete their family. By early summer 1987, Raymond had moved into Linda's apartment. Neighbors saw nothing unusual, and friends considered him a positive influence and a good addition to the family. For several months, everything seemed to be going well. Raymond appeared to genuinely care for Linda and her children, taking on the role of stepfather with enthusiasm. But beneath this calm domestic surface, the same darkness that had driven him to murder as a teenager was still there, waiting. On the night of August 9, 1987, Raymond's true nature emerged once again. What happened that night shocked even investigators who were familiar with his past crimes. Raymond attacked Linda first, stabbing her multiple times in a way that was both brutal and degrading. The wounds to her body, her chest, her abdomen, and even her genitals revealed not just a desire to kill, but a need to inflict maximum humiliation. He made a long incision across her throat and then sliced open her abdomen with a cut that stretched from her neck to her pelvis. But the violence didn't end there. Raymond then entered 10-year-old Sheila's bedroom, where he committed acts so horrific they are almost impossible to describe. He raped the child before stabbing her repeatedly in the chest, throat, and abdomen, leaving the knife embedded in her small body. 6-year-old Erin, who was in the house during these attacks, was somehow spared. After the murders, Raymond's behavior became even more disturbing. He took a Polaroid photo of Linda's body and attached it to the television. He scattered playing cards around the bodies, and left a piece of paper with the victims' names and the word "me" written on it. When Linda didn't show up for work and Sheila missed school the next day, Linda's parents grew worried and went to check on the family at their apartment. What they found inside would haunt them for the rest of their lives: their daughter and granddaughter brutally murdered, and little Aaron, alive but deeply traumatized by the horror he had witnessed. Police who arrived at the scene immediately recognized that this was far from a typical domestic violence case. The sheer brutality, the pattern of wounds, and the bizarre way the crime scene was staged all pointed to a killer, capable of extreme violence and psychological disturbance. During the initial investigation, officers spoke with Linda's ex-husband, David, who provided a crucial detail. He had seen Raymond Brown at the apartment when he dropped Erin off for a visit. This, combined with evidence from the scene, quickly made Raymond the prime suspect. An arrest warrant was issued, but Raymond had already disappeared. What followed was one of the most intense manhunts in Montgomery County's history. Law enforcement agencies from across Alabama joined forces to search for a man whose violent history made him especially dangerous. Investigators soon learned that, before the bodies were discovered, Raymond had been involved in a car accident in Walsboro, Elmore County. When police arrived at the scene, he calmly handed over his driver's license, explained what had happened, and refused medical help. He then took a bag of groceries and a fishing rod from his car and walked toward a nearby lake before his vehicle was towed away. This information helped police narrow their search to a specific area, but Raymond had a significant head start and knew the local terrain well, making him hard to find. On August 12, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department, along with several other agencies, launched a massive search operation focused on the heavily wooded area east of Jordan Lake, about 25 kilometers north of Montgomery. The search was so extensive that authorities evacuated around 140 vacationers from the area to keep them safe and to prevent Raymond from taking hostages if he was cornered. The scale of the operation showed just how seriously law enforcement took the threat he posed. Raymond's freedom ended that same afternoon in a surprisingly quiet way. After days of hiding in the woods, he simply walked out to a service station, bought cigarettes and a drink, and acted as if nothing was wrong. The clerk and other employees at the gas station immediately noticed his disheveled appearance and, suspecting something was off, called the police. Officers arrived quickly and arrested Raymond without any trouble. He didn't resist, maintaining the same calm demeanor he had shown after his first crimes decades earlier. When police searched his clothes and car, they found drops of blood. Forensic tests later confirmed that the blood matched Linda Lam, directly linking Raymond to the murders. At his trial, Raymond used a defense that many found deeply offensive to the memory of his victims. He pleaded not guilty, claiming he suffered from amnesia and couldn't remember what happened on the night of the murders. To test this claim, the court ordered a psychiatric evaluation. The results showed that Raymond had an organic personality disorder, but he was otherwise mentally competent and sane enough to stand trial. The evidence against Raymond was overwhelming. Physical evidence, witness statements, and his own actions after the murders all pointed to his guilt. The jury had no trouble reaching a verdict. On May 13, 1988, Raymond Eugene Brown was sentenced to death for the murders of Linda Lamont and Sheila Smoke. After his conviction, he was sent to death row at Holman Correctional Facility to await execution. The death sentence was the justice system's way of acknowledging that Raymond was beyond rehabilitation and posed a continuing threat to society that could only be ended by the ultimate punishment. Like many death penalty cases, Raymond's conviction triggered a long and bitter appeals process that dragged on for years. His lawyers filed challenge after challenge, raising both procedural and constitutional issues in hopes of overturning his death sentence and replacing it with life in prison. In 1990, they launched their first major appeal, arguing that Raymond's trial had been unfair from the start, especially during jury selection. Out of 66 potential jurors, 42 admitted they already knew details of the case from news reports and local gossip. The defense insisted that this exposure had tainted the jury pool and denied Raymond a fair trial. To support their argument, they presented 53 newspaper articles filled with details about the murders and Raymond's criminal history, showing just how much publicity the case had received. For a brief moment, it looked like their arguments might succeed. The appellate court agreed and granted Raymond's appeal, overturning his death sentence. For the first time since his conviction, there was a glimmer of hope for him, but that hope didn't last. The Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office refused to give up and appealed to the Alabama Supreme Court, the state's highest court. There, Raymond's small victory was undone. The Supreme Court reversed the appellate ruling and reinstated the death penalty, putting him back on the path to execution. The legal battle wasn't over yet. The appellate court stood by its earlier decision and sent the case back for another review. The back and forth continued until a new trial was ordered. But at the retrial, the outcome was the same. Raymond was convicted on all counts and sentenced to death once again. Still, Raymond's defense team refused to give up. In 1995, they filed yet another appeal, this time claiming that the jury selection process had been biased, arguing that the court had unfairly dismissed potential jurors based on social and racial prejudice. The circuit court dismissed the claim outright, finding no evidence to support it, and the Alabama Supreme Court later upheld that decision, closing off another avenue of hope for Raymond. By the late 1990s, Raymond's attorneys were running out of options, but they tried once more. This time, they argued that their client had been denied his constitutional right to participate in jury selection, and even alleged that one juror had lied during the process. But again, the appellate court rejected these claims, stating there was no proof, and even if there had been, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. From that point on, the pattern was set. Every remaining appeal was denied. Claims of ineffective counsel were dismissed. Arguments that the death penalty was cruel and unusual punishment were brushed aside. One by one, each court refused to intervene. In the end, Raymond's fate was sealed. The long, exhausting fight through the courts had changed nothing. The death sentence remained. Raymond Eugene Brown died on death row in 2008, 20 years after receiving his sentence. His death marked the end of a life defined by violence, manipulation, and a chilling inability to feel genuine remorse for the suffering he had caused. Throughout his decades on death row, Raymond never expressed real regret for his victims or their families. He never offered insights that might help prevent similar tragedies or assist law enforcement in understanding the mind of a killer. Until his death, he remained the same emotionally detached individual who had confessed to a triple murder as a 14-year-old boy. Raymond's death brought a measure of closure to the families whose lives he had destroyed, but it could never restore the 5 women and girls who died at his hands: Ivana Ogle, Ethel Ogle, Berta Mae Martin, Linda Lamont, and 10-year-old Sheila Smoke. The case of Raymond Eugene Brown stands as one of the most disturbing examples of the criminal justice system's inability to predict and prevent repeat violence among dangerous offenders. His crimes spanned nearly 3 decades and involved 7 victims, 5 who died and 2 who survived. Raymond's story exposed deep flaws in how the system handles juvenile offenders who commit extremely violent crimes. His ability to convince multiple professionals that he was rehabilitated, while still harboring the capacity for extreme violence, demonstrated a level of deception that challenges our basic assumptions about criminal psychology. The failure to recognize his ongoing danger after his first parole in 1973 led to the sexual assault in 1980. The failure to learn from that incident led to his release in 1986 and the subsequent murders of Linda and Sheila. Each decision to grant him freedom had tragic consequences for innocent people. How could a seemingly normal 14-year-old commit such calculated, brutal murders? How did Raymond manage to convince so many experts that he had changed? Should someone who commits multiple murders as a teenager ever be considered for release? Raymond's story suggests that some individuals may be fundamentally different from the rest of society in ways that current rehabilitation methods cannot address. His consistent pattern of violence remained unchanged, despite decades of supposed treatment and reform. As we reflect on the crimes of Raymond Eugene Brown, we must remember the 5 women whose lives he destroyed. Ivana Ogle, 82 and disabled, died in her own bed. Ethel Ogle, 63, was murdered by her own great-nephew. Berta Mae Martin, 31, suffered 123 stab wounds because she caught Raymond stealing. Linda Lamont, 31, was trying to build a stable life when she met a man she believed could complete her family. 10-year-old Sheila Smoke died in terror and pain. 6-year-old Aaron survived, but was left with trauma that would affect him for the rest of his life. The woman Raymond assaulted in 1980 survived his attempt to strangle her, but carried physical and emotional scars. These victims represent the true cost of Raymond Eugene Brown's violence and the system's failure to protect them from a predator who should never have been given another chance. The case serves as a stark reminder that evil can exist without obvious warning signs, that rehabilitation cannot always overcome deep character flaws, and that the price of misjudging public safety is measured in innocent lives lost. The story of Raymond Eugene Brown remains one of the most chilling examples of how the justice system can fail to protect society from those who cannot be reformed. His ability to convince experts of his rehabilitation while retaining the capacity for extreme violence raises questions that are still relevant today. If this case has made you think about the complexities of criminal justice and the challenge of accurately assessing dangerousness in violent offenders, please share your thoughts in the comments below. How do we balance the hope for redemption with the need to protect innocent people? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime documentaries that explore cases like this, stories that force us to confront difficult questions about human nature, the limits of rehabilitation, and the systems designed to keep us safe. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous person isn't a stranger in the shadows, but someone who has already proven themselves capable of the unthinkable.